Hey guys, this is Pierce, creator of Orders of Terra, and today I am going over the Demon Order Overview. This also includes an in-depth explanation of an Infernal Archetype and a deck list. So first off, starting with the Demon troops, we have a Lava Fiend. So this troop, the Demon Archetype, is based on discarding troops to get effects, or at least that's what it is currently. So if this troop is sent to the discard pile in any way, this could be sent from your deck, from your field, or from your hand. You can deal 350 damage to one troop on the field, and you can only use that effect once per turn, and when it's placed, you have to discard one card from your hand, and this is not optional, this is mandatory. Next, we're starting the Infernal Archetype. First of all, we have Infernal Sentinel. So Infernal Sentinel lets you discard an Infernal troop from your hand once per turn, and then it gains 300 attack until the end of your turn. So this can potentially be a 650 attack troop, and that is pretty powerful, and that's gonna run over all plus zeros and quite a few plus ones. Next we have Infernal Marauder. So Infernal Marauder, and you can discard it and one other Infernal troop from your hand to add one Infernal function from your deck to your hand and then shuffle your deck. Next we have Infernal Phantom. So this also facilitates sending troops to the discard pile because when it's placed, you send the top two cards of your deck to the discard pile. Also, when this troop on your side of the field is defeated, you can extra place a +0 Infernal from your discard pile, except for Infernal Phantom. And you can only use each effect of Infernal Phantom once per turn. So now moving on to our search engine, this is the way that you're going to be getting Infernal cards into your hand. We first of all have Infernal Pyromancer, which when it's normal placed, you can send an Infernal troop from your deck to the discard pile, then shuffle your deck, and you can only use that effect once per turn. Also, when it's defeated, you can deal 350 damage to one troop on the field, but it has to be sent from the field to the discard pile and has to be defeated, not just sent. Then we have Infernal Ritualist. So usually you'll use Infernal Pyromancer's effect to send a Ritualist to the discard pile, and at the end of your turn, if this troop was sent to the discard pile this turn, you can add an Infernal troop from your deck to your hand and then shuffle your deck. Also, you can only use that effect of Infernal Ritualist once per turn. Okay, moving on to the plus ones. We first have the supposed boss troop of the Infernal Archetype, which is Infernal Emperor. Now, its original attack is 0, but while it's on the field, its attack is equal to the number of Infernal troops in your discard pile times 200. And at the end of your turn, if this troop attacked this turn, you have to shuffle one Infernal from your discard pile into your deck. The Infernal deck list I prefer is not using Infernal Emperor because it's not very powerful. And for our last two troops, we have first of all Death Reaper, which is sort of Infernal support, but it is not part of the Infernal Archetype. When it's sent to the discard pile, you can discard a Demon Order troop, and then if you do, you can add an Infernal troop from your discard pile to your hand. So essentially, you could use a function like Call of the Reaper to send it from your deck to your discard pile. Then it would allow you to discard an Infernal troop like Infernal Ritualist, so you could discard Lava Fiend as well and gain its effect, and then you could add an Infernal function from your discard pile to your hand. So not a mandatory inclusion in the deck list, in my opinion, but it's good as a one-of. For our last, we have Four-Armed, and so it can attack 4 times per turn, as implied by the name. So it essentially has 600 attack, and if you discard one card, that troop can attack 1 additional time per turn. The real boss troop of the Infernal Archetype is Draconic Paladin. The text on these cards is actually wrong because there are quite a few misprints, shall we say, but its real effect says you can reveal this troop in your hand and discard 1 Demon Order troop from your hand except this troop, and if you do, the plus of this troop in your hand becomes 1 until the end of your turn. You can only use this effect of Draconic Paladin once per game. It says becomes 2 here and becomes 0 here. Those are both misprints. It actually becomes 1, and if you buy packs from now on, it will be printed as 1, and so that has been fixed. Say you have an Infernal Ritualist on your field, you have a Draconic Paladin in your hand, and pretty much any other Infernal troop in your hand, you can discard this guy, then his plus becomes 1, then you can use this guy's plus material to get out your Draconic Paladin, and then essentially you have a +3 troop for the cost of only 1 plus material. And so that is very powerful, and it's hard to get rid of, which is why any deck that's going up against a Paladin Infernal deck, which is an Infernal deck that runs Draconic Paladin, will probably want to be playing Lava Pitfall, as it is one of the only good outs to Draconic Paladin in the game right now. And what Lava Pitfall does is it reduces the attack of any troop on your opponent's side of the field to 0, and so that it'll effectively disable Draconic Paladin's ability to, do anything. Now on to the functions. We first have Infernal Reincarnation, and so this is one of the ways to get a Draconic Paladin out on your field. So essentially, if you have at least 5 Infernal troops in your discard pile, you can extra place 1 Demon from your discard pile, so it doesn't have to be an Infernal, but it can attack this turn, and then also you have to shuffle 2 Infernal troops from your discard pile into your deck, and you can only activate this card once per turn. So the second function is Infernal Eruption. So you shuffle 3 Infernal troops from your discard pile into your deck, and then if you do, draw 2 cards. cards. Then we have the last function, which is Seared Earth. This is not usually played as a 2 of in the Infernal archetype. This is usually just played as a 1 of or a none of. If you don't have Seared Earth, as it is a void rare and pretty hard to pull from a pack, it's completely fine because it's not actually that integral to the archetype. But if you do have one, playing one can be nice, as it allows you, if you have control a Demon Order troop, you can discard up to 3 Demon Order troops, minimum 1. And if you do, you can add 1 Infernal function from your deck to your hand, and you can only activate it once per game. You should only be playing 1 of this card at max. So some other functions that work well with the Infernal archetype are Call of the Reaper. This is a definite 2 of in the deck. You can send any troop from your deck to your discard pile and shuffle your deck. It's basically like a 3rd and 4th copy of Ice Rod because you can just send Lava Fiend with it. And when you send Lava Fiend, it just does an immediate 350 damage to one troop on the field. So essentially it's an Ice Rod if you want it to be. Also remember that you can send Death Reaper, so that is a definite 2 of in the deck. Also remember that Exchange not only draws you a card in this deck, but it also lets you discard a card, which can be very good if you discard something like Infernal Ritualist, which means that you can get a search. It is also worth noting that Boxer does have some synergy with this archetype, as it does also allow you to discard a card in order to increase its health by 100. And even though it is not generally played in an Infernal deck, if you are doing a draft with set 1 packs, even though that's not the best drafting experience that you could get, if you are, it is notable that you could draft Boxer as well as some Infernal cards or Demon Order troops in order to make a deck that has some synergy with itself. Okay, now for the Infernal deck list. So first we're starting off with 2 Draconic Paladins, obviously, because this is the boss of the deck, and this is the reason why the deck is good in the first place. 2 Pyromancer, because this does allow so much utility in the deck. Next we have Ritualist, so 2 copies of this as well. And sorry if these cards are a bit torn up, they're my brother's, because my brother plays Infernals and I don't. It's worth noting also that you can only use Infernal Ritualist effect at the end of your turn if it was sent to the discard pile. Next we have 2 copies of Infernal Marauder. Next we're playing 2 Infernal Phantom. Lava Fiend, we're playing 1 copy of it, although you could substitute 1 Lava Fiend instead of your Death Reaper if you so choose, but in this deck list we are playing 1 Death Reaper, and these are essentially your Call of the Reaper targets as well as Infernal Ritualist. So these 3 you'll want to be sending to the discard pile with Call of the Reaper. Then we're playing 2 copies of Brave Blighter, because essentially every deck needs to play 2 copies of it, unless they're not using a plus troop. But since this deck is using Draconic Paladin and potentially Death Reaper, you do want to play 2 copies of Brave Blighter because it lets you get an extra troop on the field, which is that troop that you need to be able to use as plus material for Draconic Paladin. And then of course, again, as is mandatory with essentially every deck list, you're playing 1 copy of Bright Flare Dragon, because it again helps you get to your Draconic Paladin. Also, we are not playing Infernal Sentinel at all, because I feel that it doesn't have as much utility as a troop like Lava Fiend. But of course, feel free to include it in any deck list that you want, because this is, after all, not the only deck that you can play. You can definitely change the deck list up a bit. This is just my preference. Next, you're playing 2 Infernal Reincarnation, of course, and a 2 Infernal Eruption. As we said previously, these cards are both very good. And then we're playing 1 Seared Earth, 2 Call of the Reapers, because this is essentially able to provide utility to either search an Infernal, if you're using Infernal Ritualist with it, become an Ice Rod, if you're using Lava Fiend with it, or recur an Infernal function if you're using it with Death Reaper. So this card has so much utility that you cannot play it at any less than 2, unless of course you do not have 2 copies. Next we have 2 copies of Exchange. Of course, this is our entire draw engine to exchange 1 Greed and 1 Omega. This is pretty standard. Then we have our Seal of Gamma for our utility, and this is just an amazing card in any deck. 2 copies of Ice Rod to counter the Radiance. If you're thinking that you're going to be mostly facing up against Radiance, which my brother is, so he's tooled his deck to do just that, and Ice Rods are amazing against Radiance. And then we have our 1 copy of Assassin, because Assassin is awesome. And of course, if you were really just dying to play the Emperor variant of the Infernal deck, you could of course just swap out your 2 Draconic Paladins for 2 Infernal Emperors. So that is it for today, guys, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Of course, again, this is not the be-all and end-all Infernal deck list, but it is in my opinion, a very good Infernal deck list. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this order overview, even though it was more an Infernal overview, but I will see you guys in my next video. Goodbye.